Well, I think the biggest challenge that Guntersville is presenting right now is that after the extreme cold winter we've had a sharp warm up behind it, and so I think it's going to be the adjustments that you're going to have to make.
Yeah, the biggest challenge out here always is you know, finding the right size fish. You know, 3 or 4 pounders on code out here, you have to have those 5 pluses.
Yeah, I think the change in conditions are going to be. I mean, we started out, the water temperature was really cold, and it's warmed up a lot yesterday, and it's going to continue to change. So I think changing conditions.
Without a doubt, I think that the fan pressure, the boats, you know, just the sheer amount of boat traffic we're going to have out there, getting around from spot to spot, I think will be a little bit of a challenge, especially if some of the high-profile guys are in your area. So that, and then dealing with the weather.
Weather condition changes. The fish were held up pretty tight before. It was stable, but it was cold, and so they were just staged up. Now it's getting warm, those fish are spreading out, and so the guy that walks away with this thing on Sunday is going to be the guy that adapts the best.
The biggest challenges is, you know, when to stay and when to go. You know, if you leave too early and the fish aren't biting, somebody else pulls in and catches them, or do you leave a spot where people have seen you catch fish? That's going to be the biggest challenge.
We basically in a setup where it was super cold early in practice, and now it's warming every day. So, biggest challenge is this going to be staying fresh and fishing the moment.
The biggest challenge this week is also going to be the biggest positive, and that is changing. It's always changing, and I think it'll be changing for the better. But the challenge is going to be to keep up with the change.
8 years old, the first time I stepped on a bass boat, I caught a 4-pounder out of a bush, and I mean, I can go back to that same bush and still catch 4-pounders out of it today. So it's a pretty special bush, I guess. Kind of started this whole thing.
Pretty much everyone that I had with my dad. You know, it's one thing is still at 39 years old to be able to go fishing with my dad is still pretty much every fondest memory that I've ever had.
I got to go to my uncle's ranch in New Mexico. He had a big private lake on it with my granddad when I was about 15 or 16 years old, and my granddad and I, we caught big 4- and 5-pound rainbow trout and 4- and 5-pound largemouth bass on back-to-back casts. I mean, it was just one of those awesome times. But mainly, even more than the fishing, I think was just getting to spend that time with my granddad and having him pour into my life.
I think I was about 9 years old when I went to a creek across the street from the house I grew up in, and I rigged up one of these Texas-rigged worms you always hear about or see on TV Bill Dance throwing. So rigged me up one of those, went down to the creek and made a bad cast across the creek, landed in a tree just on the surface. Like, oh man, that's a bad cast, you know, and I'm shaking it off, trying to shake it off the tree limb, and boom, bass comes up and eats it right off the surface. So definitely one that'll stick forever.
In grade school, when we get out of school, I'd look out there in the parking lot. There would be my dad hooked up to the boat. I mean, we go right straight from the schoolhouse to the lake and fish till dark. And we did that countless numbers of days when I was, you know, just a little guy. So those without a doubt are my fondest childhood memories.
Me and a friend, we got onto a bunch of largemouth. We found out about a local tournament coming up. We signed up, and I can still remember measuring our fish. We didn't even know how to measure them for 14 inches. Luckily, we caught, you know, 17, 18-inch fish, and we won the first tournament. Dumb luck, but I was hooked for life.
You know, anytime there was water, I had a fishing rod, you know, like I said, as soon as I could walk, and for some reason I just was always drawn to it, and you know, always loved it.
My first 10-pound bass on the St. Johns River in Palaca, Florida. I think I was like 11 years old, and you know, my dad always told me if I caught a 10-pounder, he would mount it. That was, you know, the first one I caught, so that was probably the biggest moment.
You know, I grew up fishing with my dad on Lake Sam Rayburn, Toledo Bend, and me and him won a team championship in 1997 on our home lake there at Sam Rayburn, and that's probably one of my fondest memories.
Probably catching my first bass when I was 12 years old. It was a special moment, and I was hooked.
As a real young kid, I trout fished and pan fished, and that's all I did. And when I was around 11 years old, I caught my first bass by accident on a topwater lure. I didn't even know what a topwater lure was. But that strike, that explosive visual nature of that bite, that's ingrained in my memory. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing what I do now.